So the next one, higher the risk. I know you like this one, Logan. Higher the risk, higher the reward. Yeah. Why don't you start us off on that one? What your
Yeah,
thoughts are on
so
that one?
so one of the things I was thinking about is people will often, first of all, they're focused on the wrong metric, which is return on investment. When I think of reward, I think of it in a much bigger context, right? There's lots of different types of financial rewards. Return on investment doesn't help you very much in the near term. It doesn't help you until you sell, right? I would rather receive income. I could receive protection. I could receive a lot of different things. Um, but if you really take the logic of, hey, I want to get the highest possible return, because that's what everyone's focused on. And so we'll talk about something like, let's say, whole life insurance, which I'm not saying you should get into whole life insurance to get a return. That's not the point. But people would say, oh, you should put your money into the market because you got a higher return than in whole life insurance. And it's like, wait a minute, prove it. Because what you're actually saying is not you'll get a higher return in the market, because nobody knows what the market's going to do. What you're saying is hypothetically, you might get a higher return in quote unquote the market, which is really a Wall Street jail, right? A Wall Street casino. Okay. So if you really take that to its logical conclusion, you should only put your money in the most nosebleed speculative assets possible, because Peter, you'll get a higher return. I mean, it's hype.
Right.
If you're buying some micro cap stock, or you're investing in a really early stage private placement, right, or some natural resource exploration stock, you could hypothetically get a 1,000%, a 10,000% return, right? Or you could get wiped out and lose everything. But if you really take that logic to its conclusion, that's what you should be investing in, right? Only that. But yeah, so what does high risk mean? High risk means a high likelihood that you will lose, right? Risk is the possibility of loss, right? So how does a high likelihood that you will lose translate to a high reward? And if we're talking about risk, aren't we talking about gambling now? I mean, if we're talking about risk, it seems to me we're in the realm not of investing, but of at least speculating.
Yeah,
So
and
if
I
we
actually
call
think
things
what
by their proper names, and we say you are speculating on the market, and we use words properly, then people will probably have much more reasonable position sizes and view it the right way. Because one of the ways that people manipulate us is they manipulate the language that we're using. The communists were masters of this. And Wall Street does this all the time. So they talk about saving for retirement by putting your money in a 401k. What you're actually doing is speculating in a place where you have no liquidity, no access, and no control over the outcome. That's what you're doing. So if they were to call it properly and say, hey, we're recommending you speculate, or gamble, then I think most people would at least not put so much money into it, right?
well, I know a lot of people anymore. It seems like gambling has, especially sports gambling, has really gone up these days. And I think I actually believe in a way, Logan, there's a correlation between the amount of people investing in the markets and gambling, because I think it actually, whether they realize it or not, I think that's why people like both of them. You see that a lot because they are really the same thing to a certain degree. Now, look, there's difference. There's, for example, one strategy that, if it's in regards to investing, that I really like. It's based on, some various metrics. But no, there's a lot of people that, like you said, they believe in higher the risk for higher reward. You should put your money into NVIDIA. I mean, look at the AI thing right now going on. Like NVIDIA is like a rocket ship. But I want to share my screen, Logan, and I want to talk about the Nikkei. I love talking about the Nikkei real quick. And I just pulled up. You can do the same thing, anybody. This is just CNBC. So here's the Nikkei. Now this is the Japanese index, kind of like the Dow. Okay. And I want you to look here, right here. This is 1989. Look at the way this thing went up, like a rocket ship. You know what's interesting? It was down over 30 years. Now, Japan used to be the third largest or second largest economy. It's now the third largest economy on the planet. And yet it took over 30 years for it to recuperate. Now, these people that are talking about the higher the risk, higher the reward, well, go talk to someone in Japan that was in a lot of these, stocks or funds back in 1989. It has higher the risk has not rewarded you, right? So I just wanted to show that real quick. A lot of people don't realize that. And by the way, I know some Japanese people, you might too, Logan. They are some brilliant people. And yet that happened to them, right? So
what does Warren Buffett say? Greatest investor of all time. Does he say higher the risk, higher the reward? No, he says the opposite. He says rule 1 of investing, never lose money. Rule 2, see rule 1, right? And if we're going to take on risk, like if you're going to put your money in the market into these assets, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, okay, I'm taking on risk. So what is my risk mitigation strategy? Got to have it. And it probably is going to involve some level of buying options. If you're not buying options, you have no business being in the market, in my opinion. Okay. Got to have some risk mitigation strategy. And no, having cash is not a risk mitigation strategy. Okay. You should have that anyway. That you should be doing that anyway, right? You should have your safe savings. You should have your cash, ideally in cash value life insurance. You should have your opportunity fund. That's not a risk mitigation strategy. A risk mitigation strategy is having something that's inversely correlated to what you're investing in. So if the market crashes down, your put option goes up exponentially and makes up for that loss, right? So ask your financial advisor, what is our risk mitigation strategy? If it doesn't involve options, I don't know, there might be another strategy that could work, but it probably should involve options. And then secondly, when are we going to sell? Right? So many people just put their money into a retirement account or into, I don't know, an S&P 500 index fund. And there's no thought going into, well, when am I going to sell? Because I only make money when I sell. Right? So that's the other question too, right? When, how, why am I going to sell? What would need to be the case for me to sell? Maybe it's not a timeline. Maybe it's more of like an investment thesis. But at some point, you need to be selling, because that's the other thing seasoned investors will do is they're going to take profits, right? If that's when they're up big, they're going to sell at least some to take some profits, take some money off the table, right? And when they're down, they're going to trim their losers, right? So they're going to do both. They're going to cut their losses at some point, and they're going to realize gains at some point. They're not just going to hold, to your point, Peter. The only time buy and hold makes sense is if there's something that's actually benefiting you immediately, right? And benefiting you by holding it, right? But here, the only benefit is when you sell, and that's speculating, which it's fine to do. So yeah, it's actually the opposite of the case, which you find, and you can see lots of strategies where when you blend in something like a guaranteed asset like whole life insurance, you actually improve your outcome with less risk, right? For there are a lot of different ways that can happen. So
we talked about that
to the opposite.
Right. We talked about that before. If we could reduce, going back to Moshe Milevsky, if we can take some of the risk off the table, right? And for example, use cash value life insurance so that when the market does crash, we can access the money, which we know cash value life insurance from the companies we use is always liquid, right? We can wait until the crash, put it into the market if we so choose to, and we ride that puppy back up, right?